Welcome to the Talk Dev Podcast. I'm Chancho and I'm a member of the Tomahawk Development Airsoft team in Austin, Texas. I'm fascinated by all things airsoft, and on this show, we take a deep dive into what makes a great airsoft team. So buckle your battle belt and let's get started. Today, my fellow teammate Otter and I sit down and discuss the topic of kit, uniform, weapons requirements, or KUW, and why does KUW matter in airsoft? So, specifically today, we're talking about how KUW, what role does it play in the formation of a team? Why do you need it? Do you need it? Yes or no? Is it just kind of a bougie thing to do, or is there some meaning and some good that can come from it? And how does a team that's forming balance, good and valid KUW requirements with budgets and understanding where people are at in their life stage? So I guess my first question to you, Otter, is can you recall the first time you heard the term KUW, and what did it mean to you at the time?
So the first time I heard it all put together like that was actually when we started Talk Dev just about a year and a half ago. Before that, I had seen it in action, but I hadn't really heard it all put together as an acronym. Starting out in Airsoft, the first kind of milsim game I went to, the guys who were all squared away were the ones that everyone kind of looked up to and were scared of on the field. And I didn't really realize why until recently, and when we started our team, and our kind of founder guy Caden talked us through KUW, and I started to get it.
Well, that's really interesting to hear that it's been a concept that you have felt and known about subconsciously for a while, but it's interesting to hear how just recently a definition was finally given to it. And how long have you been playing airsoft again?
Oh, I've been playing airsoft since about 2007, so that would make it 15 years or so. Wow!
So you've been around for a while, playing the game and seeing all the different styles and stuff. Can you think back to maybe some of the more interesting, fashion trends or gear trends that kind of stick out in your memory, and what about those trends can you see as useful, or what do you think was the motivation behind those gear and fashion trends?
Sure, yeah. So when I first started out, of course, most of the folks I ran with had pretty low budgets, and the trends as far as gear went was, can you carry your mags? And that was pretty much all we carried on the field, was just mags, and it was mostly just high caps. And you only needed a couple because we would be playing pickup games, we wouldn't be playing big milsim events. And so the guy who had the chest rig or a leg rig, who could carry his couple of high caps was kind of showing off, because the rest of us, we had the one high cap that we'd fill up after the end of every game, and after that maybe we'd have one in our back pocket if that's if we didn't have a lot of money. After that, it started kind of getting into, for some reason, leg rigs were a deal for a while.
Leg rigs?
Yeah.
Was there like some movie trend going on at the time, or what do you think led to that?
Well, so the Chris Costa and Travis Haley, back in the day when they started with Magpul Dynamics, they did this. It was kind of the first widely accepted, available tactical training thing for civilians. The art of the Dynamic art of the carbine, the art of the dynamic shotgun, art of the dynamic pistol. They had a whole video series. You'd mail in and you get these things. But anyway, those guys were really into, for their classes, I guess. Chris Costa came out with this leg rig with high-speed gear, HSGI, High-Speed Gear International. I don't forget the I stands for. But then everyone wanted leg rigs, and their leg rigs had like 2 or 3 AR mags and then 1 or 2 pistol mags. And it's kind of the precursor to what we have today with the small chest rigs. It was like a small leg rig.
Wow.
You
So that's kind of an interesting point. So at least from your early days playing, there was that military influence and like real steel influence that was kind of dictating the gear trends of the airsoft world. Is that something that you've seen throughout, or have you seen the influences of airsoft gear change over the years? Meaning, is military gear still the main thing, or even the only thing that influences it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen it a couple different trends in the airsoft gear community. So they've got the really hardcore kind of military simulation people. Not, I say that differently than milsim, because those are kind of a game type. But military simulation guys, where they want to dress up exactly like some kind of unit, whether that's SEALs or Green Berets or Rangers or whatever, and they'll go online and they'll look up every piece of gear that unit uses, and they'll find it in the right camo patterns, and they'll have their M9 pistol and put some kind of lanyard on it, and they're trying to emulate some particular real military unit. Then there's somewhere kind of in between where some guys say, hey, that looks cool, but I don't need 5 flashbang pouches because I don't use that much, or I don't need a big military ruck or a saw pouch because I don't use that in airsoft, and so I'm going to take some of the cool guy stuff and then pare down to basically what I use. So they'll have a plate carrier with a couple of pouches on it, and the plate carrier might be what the high-speed real steel guys use, but the rest of it is not.
That's a really interesting concept, and I want to kind of table that concept of being interested and enamored with a certain style, but then realizing that maybe you don't need all of that, or there's certain other things that maybe you need in addition to what that style is. We'll definitely come back to that, because I feel like that really impacts a lot of what Tomahawk development does as far as our kit requirements. But for now, like I said, we'll table it. So kind of going back to kind of your experience. So growing up, you had these, different trends, and you go through, the leg holsters and leg gear. Do you remember the first time you saw someone throw on, what we would call, or what we would classify as like a plate carrier versus just kind of a normal flak jacket or something like that? Do you remember the first time you saw kind of that more streamlined plate carrier setup?
Yeah, I think it was it was probably at my second milsim. I went to Camp Shelby down in Mississippi. The milsims are a great place to see a lot of different styles of stuff. So we were pretty homegrown guys with a lot of pretty cheap gear, and that's where you get to see, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know that you could do as far as gear goes. And so I think I saw a couple of guys who looked pretty high speed, and that they were pretty cool looking at the time.
Wow. So just for our kind of discussion context, what life stage were you in kind of when you started going to these events?
I was in college, just trying to. I think I was probably a sophomore, junior in college, and hanging out. We somehow got the Mississippi State to allow us to be a club. So we had an airsoft team that was the Mississippi State Tactical Airsoft Club.
No way.
MS TAC, yeah. So that we were. We had a website on Mississippi State's, servers and everything, and on forums, and we were all just playing at a local ropes course that they let us use on the weekends.
Wow,
which was a lot of fun.
Man, maybe they should add that to the SEC slate of sports, of collegiate sports.
Somehow, I don't think it would fly today, but it would be super fun.
Well, that's really interesting. So, you and your college buddies end up showing up to these MilSim events. You start seeing this more high speed stuff. How long was it until you felt those other gear options started influencing how you and your team at the time thought about gear and thought about airsoft equipment?
Yeah, so we played mainly in the woods. There was, like I said, there was a ropes course, and there was another course that we played periodically that was basically all woods that we kind of made some bunkers and stuff in. And so we didn't really think about the more high-speed looking plate carrier setups, CQB setups for a long time because that just wasn't what we were doing. So we gravitated a lot toward chest rigs after the whole leg rig phase. The chest rig that everyone wanted to have was the Haley Strategic D3CR.
Wow.
That thing was the hotness at the time, and because it carried 4 mags, it was just enough for a decently long game, and you could also put a radio or grenades or something in there. That was the one that we kind of wanted before we got to the CQB stuff later on.
That's really interesting. Did you feel like that chest rig and the associated equipment and pouches, did it fit the types of games y'all were playing, or at some point did you find out like, hey, with a chest rig with this many straps, or I don't have gear situated in a place that would make it a little bit more handy? I mean, was there something specific about the style of game y'all were playing that specifically fit the chest rigs?
Yeah, so the playing a lot outdoors and kind of in the woods, especially in hot, humid Mississippi, chest rigs were great for having lots of breathing room. The guys with the plate carriers that we saw, they'd take them off and they were just covered in sweat. They had to drink a lot more water because they were sweating a lot more. So the chest rig kind of made sense for our weather. The amount of stuff that the chest rig could carry, it started getting a little bit impractical when we moved to mid-caps. So mid-cap magazines is when you've got one single spring that's pushing the BBs. You don't do any kind of windy wheel, but means you've got a whole lot less BBs available to you, and so only 4 mid-cap mags might be a little bit shy of what you need for a long game.
Do you remember why you guys made the switch to mid-caps?
Yeah, so that was all MilSim related. So we decided to go play on these MilSims, and we got hooked. We started with Black Sheep MilSim, and that was a 24-hour MilSim. You'd show up, Friday, and then Saturday about noon they would start. 11 o'clock, noon, something like that. And then you'd start and you'd go for a full 24 hours and you'd end Sunday at 11 o'clock, noon, whatever, 24 hours from when you started. But the games required you to have mid-cap magazines because it was a more realistic thing than guys winding magazines and stuff.
That's really interesting. So I want to kind of file that data point away too, that the events, the style of play, it sounds like at this point in kind of your experience is what really starts dictating or determining changes in your gear and how you store your gear. That's really interesting. So, what was the next phase for you guys? Kind of as your team began to attend more of these mill sims, and you guys really kind of find your groove. Your teammates start getting better. What are some other trends that you found you and your teammates getting into at the time?
So when we were playing all together in the woods, Mississippi, and that sort of thing, it was us against us. We'd draw lots, or we'd pick two team captains, and they'd pick everybody, like you did back in middle school for kickball. But when we got to the milsim stuff, it was us against everybody else. And so the team dynamics changed a whole lot. Instead of everyone on the team trying to be their own unique snowflake, and everyone wanted to have, including me, wanted to have a different gun or a different chest rig or whatever from his teammates, because since we were playing each other, it was kind of a way to set ourselves apart. But when we started playing as a team in these big events, we wanted to be unified, because we're facing all against these guys who sometimes scary, sometimes not, but always against us. And so we wanted to all be, more of a unified front.
That's interesting. So that's kind of the second or third time you've mentioned that, how going against other people at these events, that there were certain folks that came across as scary. Was there any specific gear that would really kind of tip you off to an opposing player being what you perceived as dangerous?
At the time, it was probably just looking like they came straight from the military, straight off of a plane from the Middle East. If they had all of their kit was matching, if their gun was painted and maybe had some battle wearing on it, which is basically like just evidence that they used it. Then it was like, maybe this guy knows a lot more than I do, who's been keeping my magazines in my back pockets for the last year or two.
Yeah. Man, that's really interesting. What did the impact of the opposing forces team cohesion or like uniform cohesion have in terms of those kind of psychological games? I mean, when you would look at the opposing forces, was there any difference when you would see maybe only one or two guys who looked like they had stepped right off the plane, or if you saw a full unit, would did that have a different impact?
Oh, for sure, yeah. We were like, if we saw that crew of dudes who all their camo was matching, not only their camo but their gear was all matching. They were. It looked like they had been rolling around in the dust in the Middle East or something. That like, we don't want to mess with those guys. So if we saw them on the field, we would try to find another objective and swing around. We wouldn't try to face them head on. That's kind of been a big thing, at least in that team that I was in previously, is we were big on being sneaky and flanking around, but I think a lot of that was because we were afraid to face some of these folks head on.
Wow. Man, that's a really interesting point, because I know just from talking with you and some of your buddies from school. I mean, you guys have some really experienced players. You guys are really good, and you're really tactically sound. But it's just interesting, kind of the role. I mean, would you say those feelings about gear, and your ideas on whether or not an opposing player was dangerous or not? Do you think the other guys on your team felt that way, or was that maybe something that you picked up on just yourself and wasn't really talked about much?
Yeah, I think there was only a few of us who really kind of felt that peer pressure, fear about the guys who looked like they knew what they were doing. Most of the guys that I played with were engineering types, and they didn't really care about what someone's gear looked like. They really just cared about whether or not their tactics were sound and whether or not we could beat them. And sometimes I think that if they looked squared away and it looked like they've got airsoft guns that were more upgraded than ours because they maybe had some more money or whatever, then we might not face off against them. But for the most part, I think me and a few others were the only ones who kind of cared about the KUW at the time.
Okay. That's really interesting. Just kind of that whole, juggling of your life stage, your style. And it sounds like, I mean, from what you were saying just a second ago, that even though your team wasn't in a place where you all can necessarily afford some of those, like some of the higher end gear, maybe some of the newer trends, you still adapted your game to, maybe what you perceived the opposing force was strong at. So that's interesting. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit, when did you kind of make that transition from playing with your buddies there to, obviously now you're here in Austin, Texas. What was that transition like for you as far as airsoft style, airsoft gear? Was that change in gear something that was already on your horizon at that point, or was it kind of a new concept for you once you got here?
I saw a little bit of everything, actually. I was getting into a little bit of real steel shooting, and some of the friends that I had made in that area were into a little bit higher end gear than my Condor stuff that I had been running for years and years. And so they sort of peer pressured, sort of convinced me into getting a plate carrier, a real one from S-Tac, and it was more comfortable than my Condor stuff. I also was a whole lot less scared about ripping it up because it was built like a tank.
Really?
Yeah.
So you could tell a noticeable difference between like good to high quality gear versus some of the lower stuff that's typically used in airsoft?
For sure. It was probably just it was better stitching and it was better Cordura on there. It fit me better than the stuff I got that was Chinese made, and I felt like I could do more stuff with it because I felt not only more confidence in the gear, but I also felt cooler because I had this cool gear on. Yeah. So that gave me some more confidence in that area.
Yeah, that's neat. Do you remember, do you have any memories of kind of certain games or certain days of kind of the first time running some of that new gear, maybe a little higher quality, when you really kind of said to yourself, man, I am sure glad I have, this. Like, I would have struggled with this particular activity or movement in the past. I mean, do you have any of those memories or anything that stands out?
Yeah, so there was I was playing at Guardian Center for a American Milsim game a year and a half ago or so, and there was one point when me and a squad of guys got mowed down. We stepped out from a building and there was somebody waiting for us with an LMG. And so we were all sitting there with our dead rags, and someone came up behind us and said, "Hey, I'm going to medic you." Well, in American Milsim, you got to drag people to get medicked. And usually folks with lower end gear like I had kind of grown up using dread that part because if you start getting dragged by your gear, which is what people love to grab, they don't grab your arms or anything, they're going to grab any kind of strap they can find, your gear inevitably starts to fall apart. Seams will rip, buckles pop, all sorts of stuff. But at this particular event, someone grabbed my gear and dragged me over gravel and through mud.
No way.
Yeah, and nothing bad happened. After, it all held up. I wasn't going to say it's comfortable to be dragged, but I was not. After the first second or so, I was like, you know what, this is not bad. I'm not worried about this stuff falling apart.
Wow. Oh, that's interesting. That's funny how, in airsoft, everyone all of a sudden turns into, the wannabe Vietnam medic who's, double fisting two different guys by the neck collar of their, flak jacket or plate carrier, and wants to haul their buddies off into safety. And that's funny how that happens.
Oh, I love those medic guys.
Well, yeah, man, that's really interesting. So, and then obviously kind of around that time, I'd moved to Austin, and you talked me into coming out, playing some airsoft. And, for me, it was funny, the impact that clothing and gear had on me. So I remember you invited me out, and the day or two before, I'm thinking, man, I got to find some camo. I don't want to go running out there in some, t-shirt and blue jeans. And so I go to Walmart and I buy, whatever set of, deer hunter woodland stuff they got. And I remember putting it on just at that time thinking yeah, that is kind of cool. And then showing up that next day and realizing, oh my gosh, these people are wearing camo patterns that are so far removed from the style that I had, and just felt like the biggest goofball. And I remember already feeling nervous and anxious because, of getting into airsoft and playing for the first time, and, just the speed and the intensity of it just felt so much more greater and intense than what I remembered, when we would, play BB guns as kids and whatnot. And just that entry into that whole world of camo and gear. And
so let me ask you, did you, when you went out that first time, did you feel did you see somebody in full kit, uniform, weapon that you thought, oh crap, I'm done now, or that guy's cool looking, or was it just so much of an overload, just all of airsoft combined, that you weren't really noticing what folks were geared up with? It
was definitely the first one. I mean, I remember being out there and just realizing, oh man, here I am, this 30-something-year-old guy who's trying to get back into this thing, and I'm showing up wearing some Walmart camo pattern, and I feel like I'm sticking out like a highlighter in the middle of the field. Everybody can see this goofy pattern that I got on and can tell I'm a newbie. I'm doomed, I'm gonna get destroyed. And I did, and it was rough. And I remember after that, just that was the first time. Thankfully it happened, after the first time out, but that was the first time that initial thought and initial like seed of your gear matters, and it's not just because of looks, but it is like my pants, the pants I had felt way too thin. I didn't have knee pads. The shirt and everything was just like, man, this is not suited for this type of environment. And so that was the first time that kind of that initial thought of like gear matters. But I will say at that point, it was still very much a beauty pageant to me, so I would say, 95, 98% of it was looks. That was like, the reason these other guys are dressing up are because of looks, and maybe 2 to 5% is based off of function. But then as we started to play, more and more the little details of some of our gear and my old gear really started to the downside of it really started to show itself, I'd say.
So what was the first when did you first think, all right, this particular piece of gear is not a beauty pageant thing. This thing is functional. Even though it may look cool, I think I see where the function might be in it.
Man, it's an interesting question. So I think for me, probably around the same time, it was the pants knee pad combination, but also with gloves. Because initially the gloves that I got were like these, Walmart deer hunter camo gloves. And I realized early on that they didn't have the protection and they didn't have the grip that I needed, to like changing out mags and, protecting my hands from, BB shots to the knuckles and things like
those
that.
Are the worst.
Yeah, golly.
Oh, those hurt so bad.
Yeah, that's those definitely sting, and in fact, that's probably a good topic for another podcast sometime. Kind of the top 10 worst places to get shot. But I mean, for me, it was it's the little things. It's the flexibility of the pants, the grip of the gloves, and and as I'm thinking about it. And thinking about kind of our Tomahawk development KUW currently, I remember you initially loaned me kind of like a wire mouth mask thing, and just remembering how clunky and how heavy that felt on top of, and I think you also loaned me a pair of almost like ski goggles, that you had kind of poked some holes in to let him breathe. But I remember just the weight of that on my face just feeling so suffocating and just claustrophobic. I mean, it was really overwhelming. That change in gear that we've had over the last year has definitely been something I've appreciated and valued. So kind of talking about those initial stages starting to play here in Austin, let's fast forward a little bit. We meet Caden, and I mean, he is squared away GMR. He is running slick, low pro stuff.
Oh yeah, so GMR, for those who don't know that one, there's this airsoft team called the Green Mountain Rangers, and what they did is, a little while ago I mentioned that some players like to imitate military units, and some players say, hey, for airsoft, I don't need all that stuff. And so the GMR guys, I have been sort of perfecting that airsoft middle ground for a while. The team itself has got an interesting reputation. They sometimes have been labeled as jerks and sometimes have been labeled as cheaters, but they are very excited about getting really, really good at airsoft. And part of that is how they kind of set up their gear. And so that's kind of to give you and they, not only do they set up their gear a little differently than a kind of real operator guy and would do, but they also make some gear, which is what we saw Caden, our team founder, fellow, wearing when he first showed up, with some of their gear that they made, along with, some of the operator stuff. It was kind of a combo.
That's really an interesting point you made about the reputation that GMR got. Do you feel like that reputation was, I don't know if it's fairly or unfairly, but do you think it was, stapled in a way to their gear style as well? That kind of when you see that style, that's the reputation you think of?
Yeah, I think so. I think GMR's gear style makes you think of them, at least somewhat. And even if you don't know the team and the team's reputation, you see this guy who's really squared away and very serious about the sport. And at least for me, when I first ran into it, I was like, that's a try hard. That guy's trying way too hard. He's way too serious about this thing. Mm-hmm. Other tryhards I've met in the past are all kind of jerks and self-absorbed and that sort of stuff. So even if you didn't know who GMR was, it kind of has that same connotation.
Man, that just thinking about just the psychology behind all that, and what is it about someone who has better gear or nicer gear or different camo patterns or whatever it is. It's interesting how the external observer, how that's kind of an initial judgment that comes up. I know that's one that I definitely struggled with. Is I'm as we're a little older, and me being a little older and getting into it kind of for the first time seriously, last thing I want to do is come across as one of these try hard guys. But like what we'll get into in a little bit is, I've quickly found, man, just gear makes such a big difference. So with that in mind, do you remember the first time in playing with Caden and kind of the initial creation of the team where you felt like you were starting to have a change of mindset and heart when it came to gear that you had previously associated with some of these try-hard dudes?
Yeah, so I started to really take inventory of the stuff that I had on my gear, what I was using, what I wasn't using, what would make my gear a little bit better. And I realized that, I needed some kind of hydration pack for the type of stuff we were doing, to carry some hydration, to carry the BBs that we were using. So I needed to switch plate carriers. And I also realized that the plate carrier that I had was a little bit clunkier compared to the stuff that Caden had on. And I thought, I had gotten pretty destroyed a couple of games that Caden seemed to do pretty well on. And he was moving a little better than I was, and he was he had more range of motion than I did in my bigger carrier. And I thought, hey, if I'd like to be more like him. I'd like to, do better. So maybe when I switch plate carriers or something. Sorry about that. We had a plane come through. It just wanted to hear what we had to say. Anyway, so I was saying that Caden's gear seemed like it worked a lot better for him. And at the time, I was also watching a lot of Lucas from T-Rex Arms talk about training and how sometimes you gotta do what works. And so I started to look at Caden's stuff. I started to look at the GMR guys' stuff, and it seemed like their stuff worked with the minimal amount of bulk and extra accoutrements that I don't need as far as an airsoft guy. If I was, jumping out of a plane in a foreign country, I probably would want something else. But for as far as airsoft goes, that had all the stuff I needed and none of the stuff I didn't. So I was like, well, I'll try it. So I got myself a JPC and started the journey.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. So one thing I want to maybe see if we can flesh out a little bit more is, what was it about that was changing with maybe your style of play, our style of play with Caden? What were some of the things and the tactics that we were focusing on that really lent themselves to reevaluating our gear? Like, what was it about our desired style that led us to maybe the KUW we're under now?
Yeah, so I think for Caden, he's a little bit more focused on the visual, on the kind of what the team looks like. I think he said at one point that airsoft was 50% how you look and 50% how you play. And so,
always looking fresh.
Oh yeah, all the drip. And I don't quite agree with that, but I do agree that looking squared away probably means you're squared away. If someone else can notice it and say, hey, look, that guy looks like he knows what he's doing, it probably means that you thought about where your mag is and why it's faced that way, and how you're going to grab it when you reload, and why your radio is placed that particular spot, and why it's got a marking on it right there. And so there are some it's the little things that add up that you're like, you know what, maybe there's a reason for that.
Yeah. One thing that I've really noticed too is how whenever we're wearing the same camo, or like we look similar, we have really tended to draw a bunch of other random players around us to us, which from just a pure tactical perspective helps us out a lot, especially if we can figure out how to communicate to them what our objectives are, what we're trying to do. We can get them to maybe help cover for us or distract or different things. But what I've found is, when we all match, we all look, cohesion going on. We tend to do that a lot more than the days when we're kind of running looser requirements, and we're all just kind of doing every man for himself, just kind of out having fun. I can think of a few situations like that, especially, some of at the field that we play here in Austin, Texas Paintball, not a sponsor yet, but playing at some of their Counter-Strike games and stuff where, our side is all spread out, and people will come up to us because they've seen, hey, you're the guys with the, AR-1s and the balaclavas, and, where are you guys going? Can we help? Can we come? And people seem to gravitate towards that. I mean, I don't know. Have you noticed that, or are there any examples of that come to your mind?
Yeah, for sure. It seems like folks, especially the kind of newer players, and maybe they're not even newer, maybe they're just a little less experienced, will gravitate towards someone who look like they know what they're doing. And they're like, okay, well, I want to learn from you. It looks like you look like you know what you're doing, and you act like you know what you're doing, so we're going to follow you to wherever you're going. And we've definitely had that a bunch. There was a couple of games where there was one where we were trying to take a building, and the we took it, but our guys didn't know that we had taken it, and they kept assaulting the people who were on their same team who were already in the building. And so at one point I got in there and I poked my head out and I just started yelling at them. And if I said, "Hey, we've got the building, come on, we've got the building, let's go," and everyone was confused for a second, but then they're like, "Oh, well, he's acting confident, he looks like he knows what he's doing. All right, cool. I guess we got the building, guys." And so they all ran in like, "Okay, cool. Where do you want us?" And they, asked me where to go. And so it's part of being competent. Will also give you confidence, which will also help you be competent. It's kind of a reinforcing cycle.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think for me, that's the biggest takeaway through kind of this last year and a half or so of going through this process of, initially struggling with the KUW requirements, thinking, man, no one's going to tell me like what I need to, to have or what I need to look like in order to play.
So what was, sorry, I was sorry to interrupt you there, but what was when we started talking about KUW, what was the part that, so KUW requirements is kit, uniform, and weapons. And so we've got to have a certain type of weapon, certain type of kit, certain type of uniform in order to be on the team, to be considered a member of the team. What part of that irked you the most? What part were you like, man, this is dumb. Why are we doing this part?
I think for me it was the brand name, specifically calling out certain brands, because I guess for me, coming from, so I guess to take a step back, I grew up in the surfer skater culture, where and I was into surfing and skating because it was things that I could do by myself. It was kind of my way of building my own rules and my own just rules for myself, as far as, in surfing, for example, shortboarding was, the big craze going on. And I gravitated towards longboarding, and so much so that, I went super old school. For me, it was the biggest, heaviest board I could find, because I wanted to stand out. I wanted to show that, I wasn't just a follower. I wanted to be a leader, and I wanted to be someone who stood out, and but also show I was tough. I liked the challenge of riding big, heavy longboards and kind of thumping beach break surf. And I think I've probably and then kind of along those times skating, everybody would be buying their like Chad Muska skateboards, or I forget now all the skateboard brands, but I would just have like the what? Element. Yeah. I remember my friend at the time coming up to my driveway wanting to skate, and he had this brand new featherweight Element deck he had gotten for Christmas, and the kid was the biggest poser you've ever seen. But yet me and like my other friends who all were riding like Powell blanks, you get for $30 a pop from the local skate shop, we were the ones jumping ramps and doing flip tricks and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that probably carried over into my mentality of getting into airsoft, that I kind of saw a noble challenge of, well, I'm going to run the cheapest, like, goofiest gear and not look squared away, and I'm going to figure out how to, whoop up on all you guys, and so there's kind of that like noble challenge in it. But
what is that about? Is it just human nature, or is it just the nature of being guys that you want to, or is it just an underdog thing? Because that was definitely a thing for airsoft as well with my Mississippi crew, is we were, for the first while, we were very scared of the guys who looked very squared away. And after a time, we'd get to know there are guys who look squared away, and there are guys who are squared away. And the guys who looked squared away are the ones who just bought the gear and had never played with it, and it was brand new, and it was the name brand best of the best. It was all matching, looked great, but they just never used it, and they sucked.
Yeah.
And we love destroying those guys.
I think it goes back to, like, why is the Robin Hood story so still popular today? Or, like, why, in the kind of military milsim world, we hear these stories of groups of, 5 SEALs who wearing, robes and turbans and a few AKs go behind enemy lines and use their SEAL tactics to, like, totally upend the enemy, and spoil some crazy terrorist plot or something. It's like, I think it just kind of feeds into that concept of a challenge, being the underdog. But I will say, I think the ultimate purpose and goal of that is camaraderie. And I think because there's something to be said for, like, being an underdog is not what gives someone great joy or satisfaction out of something. It's being an underdog with a group of others and, like, sharing in that experience with others. It builds kind of a tighter camaraderie. And I think that is ultimately, at least for us and with our airsoft team, that's for us is what we are striving for, and is our goal, is how to build camaraderie. Because going back to that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy concept, or whatever, however you said it, camaraderie builds teamwork builds success, and success builds camaraderie, and it just kind of goes in that circle. And it's fun being good. It's fun growing and learning and getting better together and getting to experience successes of your buddies. I think back to this last time we played. We had a special guest, Sal from TCA, came and played some pickup games with us at Texas Paintball, and one of our buddies earned a TCA patch, and the coveted TCA patch,
TCA black patch,
the black patch, and and Sal could tell he was with our group, and I think he could tell that from how what our gear and our kit looked like, but he could also see that in how we interacted with Jose, and see that camaraderie. And I don't know. I think for me, that's ultimately what I've settled on, and where I'm at with it is, the KUW is required because it helps foster team unity and team camaraderie, but it also serves as that kind of beacon to outsiders of, hey, you can run with us, you can trust us, follow us, and we'll help you have fun. We'll kind of help give you a good, fun experience, and and I don't know. I think that's kind of where I'm at with it currently.
So, throwing in a wrinkle, where do you think the line is between being squared away with gear, team camaraderie, that sort of thing, and buying gear because you guys are posers?
Man, yeah, that's
you want to look a certain way, and you want to look like the coolest operators. Like, where does the line go from, like, hey, you have good gear, to, hey, you are a good team?
Yeah. And man, that's such a tough question. And for me, I think the number one thing that you first need to understand is KUW requirements are a gate. They are not the be-all, end-all, but they are a gateway into something. In our case, it's a gateway into a team. Because of that, I feel like personally that things like camouflage pattern and certain types of chest rigs or plate carriers, headgear, balaclavas are a requirement for us, and all of these to me have a reason, a very specific purpose. The uniform is so that when I look out across the field, I can quickly pick out the guys who are in Arrow 1s and know, oh, I got 3 buddies over there. The balaclavas are important because, and even this gets into some of the design of our patch, but it is not about me as a person on our team. It's about our team and playing as a group. And I can't tell you how many times when we've played out different places that we've had other players come up to us, come up to me and be like, hey, was that you over behind that wall there? And yeah, and like, no, that wasn't. That was actually my buddy. And what they picked up on wasn't so much me, but it was one of my teammates was playing like a beast, and they noticed that. And that instead of focusing on the person, instead of being like, oh, you're the Michael Jordan of the group, it's, oh, all you guys shred, because every time I look up and I see, Arrow 1 and Balaclava, that dude is shredding somebody, and like, so, it's that focus and emphasis on the team. So once again, for me, it's camo pattern, it's the balaclava. I would say we're fairly lenient within reason with headgear. Some of us wear helmets, baseball caps, boonie hats. But it typically has to match the pattern. And what we found too is that also factors in to comfort, your durability for the day, protection. If I choose to not wear, a headgear or whatever, and, no face covering, all I'm going to wear is just shooter glasses, in the first game of the day, I get pocked up on the cheek or something, or, lips or something, I might be done for the day, or, might not be that eager to the next game charge as hard as we were the time before. But having those few little protective pieces can help you play longer, more sustained force and energy throughout the day. So I'd definitely say for us, there's a reason for everything. And I would say kind of, where I draw the line, camo pattern, headgear. Now, you asked those of us who have been in the group for a while, and we play, I would say if I had to best describe our style of play, it would be tactically aggressive. And that we're definitely not out there running around like a bunch of speed softers. We try to stay together and play as a group, but yet we try to push the tempo. And we're tough on our gear. We're tough on our clothes. In fact, recently I bought kind of a cheaper pair of pants, Arrow 1 pants, and they split on me. And because of the aggressiveness and the tempo that we play with, man, I wore them out pretty quick. And so it's times like those where the game calls for, our team calls for a certain unity of play and a certain style of play, and you find out pretty quickly which pieces of your gear can hold up to that style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, and we have started to make a name for ourselves for sure with our look, which is sort of GMR like, but sort of not. Somewhere between all of them. So something we haven't really talked about yet, but we've mentioned it a couple times, is weapon. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the weapon sort of requirements we have for our team?
I think currently and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think currently we kind of have a general understanding of, real or like replicas of military use weapons. So your standard, M4 style. I think one or two of us might even. This isn't U.S. military per se, but MP5s, things that maybe are a little bit more traditional. I think we definitely have a soft spot on our team for all special forces gears, regardless of the nationality. I know that movie 6 Days is kind of a favorite of ours, and running around in all blacks and running around with MP5s. But I don't know. For me, if a guy shows up running, man, I don't know, some laser beam shooting, kind of space age gun or something. Man, that's a tough one, because I don't know necessarily if he had everything else that I would like turn him away or say he couldn't be in the group. But what I think he would probably find is another thing that's important to us is being able to be there for your teammate. And what that can look like at times is lending an extra mag, or filling in with an extra, say a buddy has a sight that's broken, or needs an extra, rail attachment, or, like you loaned to me today, a Picatinny rail segment or something. It's good and it's valuable to be able to share equipment and gear amongst your teammates when it's needed. And if a teammate has a gun that is just so far off the wall, it's not that they can't be a part of the group because they're not cool, but I feel like in a way they're almost doing themselves a disservice by limiting the help and support they could get in kind of a tense situation, potentially in a game, or there's been times where we've showed up, I've showed up, or someone else on our team, and halfway through the day a piece of gear breaks, or something happens with their gear or the gun, and because others have similar comparable gear, that person is allowed to keep playing throughout the day, and we're all able to keep having a good time together, instead of that person's day being ruined prematurely and being frustrated with kind of whatever weird attachment they have, and so
or battery they need for their weird gun that won't, batteries that we fit on our crane stocks aren't going to fit in your whatever AK beta thing.
Yeah.
So definitely good.
So I guess just to kind of summarize everything that we've gone through, why is KUW important to Tomahawk development? I'd say first of all, after hearing Otter's, your stories, I mean, kind of a change in gear comes from a change of experience and new lessons learned. And I think all of us, you and Caden especially, and AJ and Jose, and have learned a lot of valuable lessons in your gear, and I'm starting to learn those as well. So KUW requirements are valuable because of past history and lessons learned. And the second thing I would say, to summarize, is that team unity and kind of being, that beacon of community and, dependability, and, for those people who kind of on, other players playing along with us who might not know us, it's an example of trust, that they know they can trust someone who's looking like that or who has a certain setup, and which results in them having a better time. And and then lastly, just the being there for your teammates. Ultimately, what we get the most satisfaction out of is being a good team. We do the best when we play as a team, and being able to be there for your teammates through the KUW requirements has been a really good thing, and we've seen a lot of benefit and kind of good fruit from that. I don't know. You have any other thoughts to share, or any other?
Yeah. So coming from a airsoft background where it was almost like every man for himself. Everyone's trying to be their own special operations snake guy, splinter cell by yourself sort of deal, and then meeting up with a group of guys who want to play together with you regularly against other folks and getting that kind of camaraderie has been really awesome. And the adage, faster alone, further together, really seems to make sense. That sure, if I was by myself, I could sneak a little better, or I might be able to ambush a few more guys than I would if I had, to drag along 3 or 4 teammates through the woods to get there. Mm-hmm. But with my teammates, we take the objectives. We, instead of just getting kills, we win games, and we also have fun together. Mm-hmm. We're building friendships, and I think that's a whole lot better than what I had in the past.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of another thing that I was thinking of is, I would say at this point we're not, Tomahawk Development. We are about building a community of friends and fellow airsoft lovers and guys who just like to hang out and have a good time. We have some basic KUW requirements. At this point, we're not necessarily requiring you have the latest and greatest Haley Strategic or T-Rex Arms thing or JPC or anything. But what we have seen though is that even though we don't mandate those brands, that guys in our team start to see the value and benefit of those. And so what naturally is occurring is guys want to get better gear that will allow them to play better so that they can better support their teammates. And it's so instead of being so focused on the equipment and what gun I have and what, this and that, it's understanding the ultimate goal of the team and what style results in the most amount of fun. And what we're seeing is that getting good gear does matter. So anyways, just some things for you guys to think about. Thanks for tuning in and giving this a listen. Next time you see us out at Texas Paintball or, Texas Airsoft 10 or Mission or anywhere else here in Central Texas, please don't hesitate to walk over. Say what's up, come chat for a while. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to hear about your story and, what's been some of your experiences and your struggles and successes with your kits and, what's working for you. Anyways, thanks a lot, guys. This is Chancho.
This is Otter. Thanks.
You've listened to the Tomahawk Development Podcast, and we will catch you next time. Thanks.